Welcome to the Athlete Impact Collective. Today's guest is Shane O'Leary. Welcome, Shane, to the podcast. If you just want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you have going on at the moment.
Hey, bro. Thank you for having me on. Shane O'Leary, Irish born, Canadian citizen as well through birthright of my mum. So that opens up some good opportunities for me in my own career. I've played professional rugby for 11 years now. Heading into my 12th season in January. So I've got a lot of experience across the board there, playing in Europe, North America, here at home in Ireland as well. I'm currently running a bit of a mentorship for aspiring rugby players who want to try and go professional. I think there's a big kind of hole in the market for it if you don't make one of the academy structures when you're young. I think there's a lot of opportunity for guys that maybe miss out on that initial selection, later developers, that kind of way, which I didn't take the traditional route here in Ireland, didn't make any of the academy system or setups, and then I've gone and, like I said, played in 5 different countries now professionally, as well as representing Canada at a 2019 World Cup. So lots of things have happened in my career, and I want to try and help other guys with that as well. So yeah, there's a little bit of
awesome. So is that why you initially got the rugby mentor program going? Was to kind of fill that void? And what is that void in rugby?
Yeah, so I think that's kind of where it was born out of. In the last couple of years, even when I was a younger guy, I liked helping the guys that were younger than me at training and stuff, and I'd be a big believer in doing extras and all that little extra bit of practice beforehand, afterwards, and then all the other little bits that you can do off field. And I think when you're in these academy systems, you kind of learn how to be a pro. One of the reasons being is because it's kind of shoved down your throat. This is how you're expected to behave like this, or you'll be gone. Yeah. So I think when guys aren't necessarily in that environment, it can be quite hard for them to know how to behave, and then if they go into these in really intense environments, which pro rugby is so intense, like any professional sport is, I want these guys to be ready when they get there. So it's kind of teaching them some of the, I suppose, the habits they need to have, the behaviors, how to actually analyze their own performances, that kind of stuff, how to eat, how to train properly, what they should be looking for, and then obviously kind of just filling in those kind of gaps in their own game so that we can review their club games and we can do that so that they can improve week on week on week. And I think it was born out of what did I need when I was younger, because I didn't make the traditional stuff. I was on the underage squads and that, going really well, and then it was kind of oh, you're not making the academy, and good luck, enjoy club rugby. And I was like, how can that be the end of it, of my aspirations? And so it wasn't. So I still trained at the same volume that these guys would have trained in the academy, even though I was doing it on my own or with older guys or with anyone that I could find. And mum and dad used to drive me 30 minutes in the road 5 mornings a week before school and all this fucking mad stuff. So I was like, how can I bring what I needed and help guys that are in a similar position to me, the underdog as per se. So I found that and there's lots of interest in it. We've got 8 or 9 guys in now, and it's growing all the time. And yeah, it's a great community. And I also think one of the things that I managed to surround myself with, I suppose, out of making good connections, is I think if you're trying to be an aspiring professional athlete, you need to have that elite mindset around you. And it's nothing against normal people. They're all lovely, but they don't have the elite mindset that you need to have, where you're willing to miss things, sacrifice things, and not do things, not socialize all the time. Obviously, you have to socialize. You can't live under a rock, but it's definitely a part of it where you're okay, this is my priority. This is what I want to give, and this is what I want to do. So you kind of got to go hell for leather at that. And I think that's kind of where bringing these guys together, and they really support each other, with their own skills, with helping each other on off-field stuff, even support if someone has a bad game. It's been unbelievable. It's way better than what I thought it was going to be, which is a nice surprise, obviously. Wow. But having those like-minded people in the group has been absolutely savage, so it has.
So are they talking all to each other? It's not just you working with the individual athlete. It's a community that you've created. So are they all supporting each other as well? Or is it just primarily you with one of these athletes?
So we have one-to-one game plan calls every 2 weeks where we'll review the last 2 weeks, preview the next 2 weeks, what's gone well, what hasn't, what do we need to tweak to go forward, how's the body, any injuries, do we need to tweak programming, anything like that, what games are we coming up, what are your main focuses for the next 2 weeks, what are the I suppose the big movers, what do we need to action, and then we kind of do it every 2 weeks so that it gives them time to actually process what we've spoken about and then actually go ahead and implement over the next 2 weeks. So we actually give a nice time frame where not too long that you don't feel like you have access to someone, but also it's not too short. It's like, oh, have you done that yet? Oh no, I haven't had a chance. All right, okay, well, go on. It's the same
Yeah.
idea as 4 days ago. Like, now they do have a one-to-one line with me as well, where questions can come in. Obviously within reason. 4 a.m. I tend to be asleep, so I won't be answering them. But outside of that, like, I'm pretty accessible. And then we have a group community chat as well, so where everyone's in the one group, and if someone asks a question, I'm often not the first to reply. That's the kind of group that we're starting to build. That kind of culture where guys are jumping in to help each other all the time. Whether it's with video analysis, so if someone puts in themselves kicking, a couple of boys giving pointers, or whether it's some nutrition tips or whatever it is, even stuff like buying boots or cleats, like guys help them out with that, like where to get them, or grip socks, like all that stuff, just kind of everything that you need kind of goes in there. And often if someone sends me stuff to review, I'll chuck it in so everyone can learn. And I think that's the thing about rugby is not one person in the world knows everything about it. So if you can have more minds working together, I think it's so much more cohesive, and it can be so much better for the player. Another feature that we have is we bring people in, like experts in their field within the rugby world, and we do an interview with them. So bring them in, I'll ask them a few questions, and then the boys get to, or the players get to ask them a few questions at the end. A bit of a hot seat kind of idea. So it's good. So look, we're trying to cover as many areas to the game as we can. And like I said, I'm not going to claim that I know absolutely everything. I know almost everything, but not everything. But no, we try to get as much experts in. Like, obviously, there's going to be people in their own field that know much more than me, and I think it's class that we can bring them in, let the lads have access to them as well.
Wow, that is so powerful. That's something I feel like almost any sport, but especially like you're saying rugby, because of its structure and how it's kind of designed to push you up through. Whereas here in the States, I feel like the whole point of the college and university experience is to kind of fill that gap and to prep you for the pros. But the same thing here, if you don't make it to a major Division 1 school, a lot of times the expectation for acting like a pro diminishes kind of as you move down the rankings, and the commitment does too, right? And the amount of film study and all those things kind of dwindle down as you move down into Division 2, Division 3. I was lucky in my career as well to have somebody exactly like you're saying. Like I didn't really understand this concept, but I had a quarterback transfer into the university that I played at, and he brought exactly what you're talking about. He brought that to our team, and we all thought we were, working hard and doing the extra things. And he came and introduced that, and he literally changed our entire team dynamic and just started to teach us like, hey, this is how you function as a pro. This is how you function as a high level athlete. And this is the bare minimum expectation. And it's amazing how something like that is so almost like it's infectious. Like it'll just spread across your team, because once everybody starts seeing that level, it's competitive, of course. And I think the difference too, once you move into the pros, is you're very replaceable. And the second, one of my favorite sayings is the best ability is availability. If you're not available, forget about it. And, if you don't spend the time to develop those habits, the team's not going to wait for you to develop those habits. Who's next? Who's got the habits? And I think you're filling a gap that's needed even across. I could think of so many sports and so many different scenarios where that's needed. So I expect your program to grow massively. So I hope you're ready for that, because that's going to be a really
Hopefully, yeah.
powerful thing, man. I personally, that's something I've been interested in. I just haven't figured out how to create the platform, I guess, and create the structure. So it's as you're telling me this, I'm like, oh my gosh, man, this is exactly what I've also really wanted to do, especially from a high school to college level, like the gap between there. And if you came from a smaller high school, or sometimes the coaches are volunteers, and there's not a ton of support to put those values and skill sets within you, especially if, depending what your home life dynamic is, and, how you were parented and what your discipline's like. It's not something that just comes overnight. It's a habit that you got to develop. So that's impressive, man. It's really cool that you're doing that, because you're taking your skill set that you've learned and you're trying to give back and pay it forward, which I think is really, really powerful, and what makes sports just and athletics really unique is that mentorship and that, supervision that can help provide discipline, which will lead you into success in life. And I think that's what we're, all potentially trying to accomplish with sports. Is you don't think about it when you're doing it, but as soon as you leave your sports and the life of a pro athlete, you go into life and it's like, oh man, there's that skill set coming into play, whatever you decide to take on for the rest of your life, and I think that's super cool. So tell us, where did this love for rugby, where did the journey begin? Where did it start?
So rugby started back when I was younger. I was an all rounder. Like I excelled at pretty much every sport I put my hand to, or my foot to, in terms of the rugby. Um, so so yeah, I was just an athletic kid. I loved playing any sport. Like I played when I was younger. I would have played rugby, soccer, Gaelic football, hurling, badminton, tennis, handball, like anything. If there's a new sport was in the school, basketball, I would have played everything, even as a short fella. So I would have a short king. No, so I would have given my hand. I would have tried my hand at anything, especially to miss class. That was a big motivator for me as well. So I played everything, and I would have gone decently well. Like I was never poor at anything. Some sports obviously a bit better than the others, but in terms of like coordination and I suppose sporting ability and athleticism, like I was always up at the top. Um, so anything I kind of pushed, I kind of started to get selected for teams on. Um, my dad loved rugby. Dad played rugby at a decent level, was club captain at his club, and I suppose it just would have been on the TV and stuff. I think I also liked the physicality, probably as a frustrated child, just wanting like two brothers and two sisters, and we all used to wrestle. So it
Yeah.
was like if I could get that energy out elsewhere, mom and dad were all for that. So why not bring the wrestling outside the house, kind of idea. Um, and then yeah, like I said, I kind of just excelled at it, and then it was probably the first one where there was a pathway to something more. Um, when I was like, I think it was when I think I was 14 or 15 years old, there was an under 16s like North Munster development squad, right? And I remember going in and I heard my dad was coach at the time, asking a few of the kind of better guys the year above, would they be interested in going in? And I remember hearing him talking. I was like, "What's that? Can I go?" He was like, you're young. I don't know. Should we bring you in? We'll see what they say." And should we went in? And they're like, "Yeah, yeah, come on out there." And then it went well. And then I was like, "I'm so addicted to this. I want to play for Munster in Ireland." And now neither of those things have happened. Munster underage, never played for Ireland, but I have gone on to, like I said, have a 11 season pro career and play international for Canada. So while I mightn't have hit maybe the exact things that I wanted, I've still played at that level, won competitions, finished top point scorer and other things, like all that stuff. So I think it just grew and grew and grew, and then there was another door open, another door open, another door open, and I just kind of ran with it and enjoyed it and I just loved playing sport, and I was like, oh, I can do this. I might be able to do this full time, and that means that I don't have to go to school. So
Yes.
no, I've done some school too, stay in school, but you know what I mean. It was like in a weird way, it's kind of like you don't have to grow up, like you just
Yes.
go
Yeah.
out into the playground at lunch or at recess, and just start chasing the ball around and do it and be better than everyone else did. The other thing is, as well, is when you excel at something, it's hard to walk away from it. So while
Mhm.
I'm not saying I'm an absolute world beater, I would have always been in the top percentage of it, the whole way up. And I haven't been always in the pro game. Like there's been times when it's been hard, when I've been on the wrong side of selections and stuff like that, and it fucking sucks. But it kind of just almost fuels the fire to want to go more.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of how it started. And then it was like the doors just kept opening, and I just kept saying fuck it and just keep chasing it. And now I'm still on recess, and I'm
Yeah.
31 years old, so good try.
What does the structure look like? Because I'm unfamiliar. So you're playing. It's all categorized by age group. It's not necessarily. Does it have anything to do with what grade you are in school? It just is it categorized by age group until what age group does it transition to? I guess does it go from like U18 to academy, or what does the actual structure look like where you came from?
So it's changed slightly since I was younger, but when I was younger, it was like under sixes, eights, tens, 12s, 14s, 16s, 18s, 20s, and then you're into men's rugby.
Okay.
Um, so men's rugby is anyone, and you can play that from as soon as you turn 18. So I would have started playing then. But like, so there's some 18-year-olds. There could also be a 48-year-old out there, which is a massive transition from playing with people your own age to playing against fully fledged men. when they see a young guy, they want to crush him.
Yeah.
So there's an element of that as well. You know, oh, he thinks he's good, he's young. It's like, right, let's get him. And then you get hit by some older men, and you have to learn how to not do that as often as possible very quickly. So that's how it would have worked. And then the underage like development squads would have started at like 15, 16s, but they would have been pretty local ones that were going against guys in the league that you would have played against. And then they break into the 4 provinces of Ireland from under 18 up. So then it's under 18, under 19, under 20. I think that's still the structure, but it might be 17s, 19s, and 20s now. I'm not sure. So it was 18s, 19s, 20s at my when I was younger, and then from the 4 provinces that would have played in an interprovincial series, so you would have played everyone in a round robin style. Then they would have picked the Irish under 18s, who would have gone and played some international games. So I didn't make that squad. I was in the training panel, but didn't get selected. So it was probably the first time I felt the real kind of the heartache
Yeah.
of not being selected.
So that you were
And then I
20
would have
then?
played
Or how old were you when that happened?
17, maybe
17.
17. And then the next 2 years, I would have played with the Munster under 19s and 20s, but never played for any of the Irish sides. And then
Okay.
after 20s, didn't get an academy spot. So then the top profile guys or the talent identified players will have to move into like a sub academy or academy type thing. I think it's called the NTS now, National Talent Squads. So within their province, and then I didn't get selected for that. So then for me, it was like, okay, I need to go play men's rugby and show that I'm good enough to do this. So I would have moved to like one of the top clubs in the country at that stage and started playing pretty much for the first 6 months. I would have played like men's second division and under 21s, I think it was at the time. And then from Christmas on, I would have started playing with the first team there and that kind of way. And then that summer, I went to play with Canada U20s in Minnesota and down in Chile. So that's kind of how it all developed from a younger age. So like I said, doors just kept opening. That door closed, and I wasn't ready to give up on it. So I went and played U20 with Canada in the Junior World Trophy, which we finished second, gutting to Italy in the final. But I finished top point scorer in that, so that was good because it got me a small bit more
Okay.
interest in me. And then I came back, and I actually ended up signing for Grenoble into their academy. So down in the Alps in France. So then that's how I would have got my foot in the door to the pro career. But when I hadn't been selected for any of the sub academies or academies, that's when I would have replicated the training, where I would have trained however many times, like at least in the gym 4 times a week, as well as my 2 training sessions and 2 to 3 games every weekend, which is I would not recommend to a friend because that is way too much,
Yeah.
way too much volume. But it was that mindset that separated me from being a club player to being ready to be a pro player. So like when I got into that pro environment in Grenoble, like I had my base athleticism like sorted. I had like 5 years of conditioning done, so I wasn't a skinny little weed or anything. Like I was coming in with a good kind of foundation behind me, as well as an awful lot of rugby played, where some of those guys would have played like 16s and 18s, but I'd already played a full 6 months of men's rugby as well
Okay.
as underage international rugby. So I kind of would have been ready for that. Like, and actually, just before those underage squads that I would have made, like Munster under 18s, 19s, 20s, I'd been identified as a talented player or whatever before that. So I would have trained for 2 years, 3 mornings a week before school. So getting in some S&C work, speed work, as well as some skills. So like from the age of like 16 through to 20, I had those kind of 4 or 5 years of like, I suppose, that my training age would have been 4 or 5 by the time I'd managed to actually get into an academy. Where some guys, when they came in, they're obviously a lot fresher in terms of like fresh off the boat kind of idea, where
Mhm.
they don't have that athletic base behind them because because they don't know how to do it or whatever, they haven't had that available to them. So I think that was so when I hit the ground in France, I was able to hit the ground running, started training with the pros there, that kind of way. And it felt good because I'd been snubbed on the other end. But someone else had been selected, fair enough. And then I'd gone to France and started excelling fairly quickly, where I played 5 pro games that year, from having not been put in an academy to end up playing 5 pro games in the European Challenge Cup was
Oh,
cool.
yeah.
Um, so yeah,
So when you're at the academy, is it is there any school involved with that? Is there any education attached to that, or is it the expectation that? Well, I guess it's not an expectation, but do a lot of those guys then you have jobs as well, or how does that work? Or is it usually academy
so
you
the
make
way
enough money you don't have to?
no, you'd be fairly skint now in the academy. You get a bit, but like the cost of living in Ireland has increased massively in the last 10 years or whatever. So those boys normally they're either being supported here, they might get maybe some help from Rugby Players Ireland in terms of their education, that kind of stuff, scholarships in some of the universities, that kind of way. But the way they normally set it up is, unless you're training with the pros, the academy training would be somewhat beneficial or somewhat cohesive to like the university timetables. So yeah, your main priority is your rugby, but they're trying to condense it into like the first half of the day or whatever, so that you can go to your lectures and stuff in the evening. And there's so much distant learning now anyway, that Munster Rugby or whoever, any of the provinces in Ireland, would be well connected with a lot of the universities, so that they can kind of work together to make it happen. And I think most universities that I've heard about, kind of anywhere in the world, are they're fairly willing to help out with people when they have massive aspirations elsewhere, or if they're, as long as you're not seen to be a bit of a waster, like if you're really trying to chase something like to become a professional athlete, like, and you're really working hard at it, they're normally pretty okay with like extending deadlines and that kind of thing, are kind of like somewhat to do with like attendances and stuff like that. Obviously, you have to be shown to work hard and to care, but they definitely, there's a small bit of leeway in terms of that kind of thing.
How do you, is that a big reason of why some athletes may struggle to get through that process? Is just like cost of living and the financial aspect of it? Does that cause a lot of rugby players to end their careers early, or haven't you seen much of that? Is usually they find a way, and if they're good enough, they'll break through. But I guess, is there like a gap between there where if you're a high level player, but maybe you're a medium level player, and if you're strapped financially and you can't kind of find your way? Have you seen a lot of guys across your career drop out of the sport and just go work because of that issue, or no?
So I think in the academy stuff, I've seen, like, when I would have been knocking thereabouts and wasn't selected or whatever, a lot of my good friends would have been, and a lot of those guys were picking up shifts in bars, restaurants in the evening, whatever it was. We some weekend work when they didn't have games, just trying to get in a few more euro to keep themselves going. Like, I think at that age, like, it's not massively financially lucrative, but I think as you move into, like, from, let's say, your academy contract into like a development contract or whatever it's called now, like, you'd be able to live off your development contract. Like, you can live off that. Like, again, you're not putting thousands of euro into your savings account each month, but like, it's enough to get by. And then obviously the potential to earn is significant. If you rise up, if you play for Ireland and all that, like, your salary will go up. And even guys that play consistently for their club will all be on the bones of six figures, like, you know. So there's good money to be made, but it's, I think, some of those younger guys, yeah, maybe a small bit, but I think, like, people make it work, you know. When you're
Yeah,
young and
yeah.
you're ambitious, like, you don't really give a fuck. You're just gonna fucking pull your pennies together and make it work in any way you can. If you got to pick up an evening shift 2 or 3 evenings a week to get by, to keep food in the fridge and to keep the rent paid so you can go to training every day, like, you'll do it. Do you know what I mean? And you kind of get by. And it's not like, I don't know the figures of what they do get paid now, but when we were young, it was very little. But then again, like, people's parents, if they can afford to, if they can afford to, obviously, tend to kind of come in here, and it's an investment, I suppose, or whatever, into doing it. And I think if you kind of get to that stage, like, you've invested many years into your rugby already, and it's kind of, I think it's kind of what you're hoping for. So, like, people
Yeah.
would make plans to try and make it happen. You know, like, if you don't get selected for it and you want to, that's obviously hugely disappointing. But I think a lot of people they just make it happen in whatever way they can. And then obviously you're hoping to kick on and have the career of your dreams.
And you seem like you have a lot of interest and understanding of the strength conditioning aspect. What does that look like in rugby? Like, when you're coming up through the ranks, is has strength conditioning made its way pretty heavily into, let's say, like U15, U17, U18, U20? Is it pretty heavily prescribed? And are you getting in depth programming for the year where you're getting like full periodization plans, or what does that look like? And when does it kind of start? I guess for when you played, and then what does it look like now at the moment? What does that landscape look like?
So when I started getting into those like national talent squads or whatever, and training before school in the mornings, then it would have all been for me, and it would have been the Munster Academy SNCs that were leading that as well at the time. So yeah, that would have all been periodized, whatever way. But I think, like, the main focus for them then isn't necessarily performance; it's obviously development. So like you probably be training a little bit harder than like if you're playing with the pros, like, and you're looking to turn out a performance and be at your max every weekend or whatever, as close to that as you can get. So for us, it was like if we played Saturday, we would still be in on Friday morning doing an upper body and skill session. Like it's not like, oh, let's make sure they're fresh for tomorrow. It's like, no, he's 16 years old and we wanted to play for whoever when he is 20 years old or 21 years old. So I think that's kind of the way it would have been. And then when I played like all the Munster 18s, 19s, 20s, you would have been fully looked after for that period of time. And then you go back to your club. And then a lot of the clubs here would have had SSEs at the time who would be leading the program there as well. So you kind of transition back into that one. But I think we all know like the biggest thing that you can do as a young player is just fucking show up and make sure that you are training like primarily probably strength and size as a young guy. Obviously you need to have some element of power and speed to it as well. But the biggest thing, like the underpinning physical quality is strength. Like if you're not strong, you can't be powerful.
Yeah.
If you're not strong, you won't be fast. Well, you might be fast, but you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So like that's obviously the big one that you're kind of getting after. So just chasing numbers then, like obviously, like I said, lots of my mates would have gone into the academies to try to be so competitive with them, trying to catch up or beat their scores or stay ahead of them or whatever it is. And like rugby where I am like is fucking massive, but it's small. Do you know what I mean? Like you know everyone. You know all the guys your age. You're trying to be bigger, better, stronger than them, do more work than them, that kind of way. But I'd say it's fairly decently set up. There's probably not as much like under 15s, under 17s that way, but as soon as you kind of hit that 18s and start to get kind of towards maybe the club's 20 squads or into the senior squads or into these talent identified squads, then your SSC is pretty much looked after for you pretty much year round.
One of my favorite parts about the rugby season this year was to see how the strength and conditioning, like there was so much emphasis on when someone gets injured or when someone is not playing, they are still doing their conditioning. They're still doing a lot of strength work. From my personal experience, even across, I mean, pros, NFL, they do a pretty good job of it, but and Division One, high level Division One schools too. But you see a huge drop off in like if you get injured, you're kind of just you're not really going to do much. You're just going to do your rehab. But like you guys are always conditioning, even in games. If you're not playing in a game, you're still conditioning. I've never seen that before. That was the first time I've seen that where the guys that are on the bench are coming off and it's just at the end of the game, right? Or is it at halftime too? Are they doing any work? It's just at the end of the game.
No, to just be at the game. If you play less than 20 or 30 minutes, you'd have some kind of conditioning top up. I suppose you're not getting that same adaptation that the guys will be getting from the game.
Right.
And rugby is so attritional. It's not like you you do a play and then you have 90 seconds off and the play lasts 10 seconds. It's like sometimes the ball stays in play for 4 minutes.
Is that pretty standard?
Like, obviously.
Is that pretty standard, like across the board? Like in
U15s,
you guys are doing that?
4 minutes is very long, but the ball would regularly be in play for 60, 90, 2 minutes. Like, like regularly it is in play for that long. And that's hard, like, because in that time you might have 10 actions, which could be 2 or 3 tackles, potentially 2 or 3 carries, as well as 5 or 6 big accelerations. If there's a bit of kicking, kind of just constantly moving. Like, so there's an awful lot that goes on. And then there's also the mental side of it as well, where that's fucking tiring, think that much, to do that much. And then there's obviously the emotional side of it as well. But yeah, I think like because it's so physically demanding, like you have to be interchangeable. Like if someone gets hurt, you have to be able to come in and step up and be as good, if not better, than them. And that's where the depth in squads come, where sometimes you see teams going really well, they get a couple of key injuries and their other guys aren't as good as them, but if they'll be at least as fit and strong as them, and they can either get away with it, but then sometimes if they're not, like, it doesn't work. You can run out of players, like, and we've seen at the Sharks this year how many season-ending injuries or almost season-ending injuries that we had. And sometimes you can't help them. Like, you tear your bicep in a tackle, like I'm absolutely massive and you have to tackle me, like, So like poor Tucci, like that was obviously a gutting one, but like it just happens, or obviously we seen with Burnsy when he did his ACL, like, just on a change of direction, like it happens. Like that's the way it goes, and people have to be able to come in and fill in. And I also think that it's funny to hear you say like that doesn't really happen. Like obviously it does with the NFL, but like outside of that, like you haven't seen too much of it. because as soon as I've gone pro, I've never seen anything different. Like
Yeah.
if we weren't doing that, I would have found that so fucking strange.
Yeah.
I'd
Something's
be like,
wrong here.
what's going on here? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Like, why are we not working hard? Like, so, um, but I definitely think it's also a way to keep guys in it. Like if you have a season-ending injury in preseason, like that is so much harder on the player than it is the club. Like
Yes. Oh,
staying
yeah.
mentally engaged, and even in terms of your recovery, like if you're not doing conditioning and you're not fit, your body doesn't heal as well. It doesn't recover as well. You can't use your food as well. You're going to end up gaining a load of body fat, and
Yeah.
that's not optimal. Obviously, you don't want to be losing a load of body fat either and being in a massive calorie deficit or anything. But like the most important thing to being recovery is being healthy.
Absolutely.
And if you're not, like you're really fucking pushing yourself back in terms of your timeline for your return to performance. Like um, so yeah, I think it's good because like, it can be hard being injured. Like it's not fun, and you don't like. I didn't move to Miami to rupture ligaments in my knee and sit out most of the season. Like that's
It's
not why I
not part
came.
of the plan.
You know, no. So
Yeah.
hopefully, touch wood, next season I don't. But like that's frustrating. Like and it's hard, and there's a serious emotional tax that goes with that. And sometimes you just have to show up and just get it done. You can't you're not coming in every day being 100% motivated to do another fucking 400 clams so that you don't lose all the fuck. You don't have a load of atrophy in your glutes and
Yeah.
stuff. Like when you're in a knee brace, you're like, and you got to get in the assault bike for 50 minutes and just use your arms. You're like, if they needed to torture people for information, this would be a pretty good place to start. Like,
How have you managed
so
your mindset through all that? And I'm sure you've had, you know, many injuries throughout your playing career. How have you found ways to manage that? And what does that progression look like for you? When you first had your first couple injuries versus your most recent couple injuries, what has changed and how have you grown as a player to deal with those things?
I think like for me personally, I'm very logic based. Like I obviously have emotions and I feel emotions and all that, but I'm very good at coming back to the facts, which is why obviously I worked quite closely with you throughout my injury, and I would be grilling you every day about what I was doing, why I was doing it, how much longer am I doing this for, because it helps me to have more information. I don't like being blind going through the process because I need to know what I'm striving to do. When can I move on from this? Okay, when you do this, perfect, let's go. I can do that now. So now I can work with that. There's my little mini goals. And I think having those mini goals, and sometimes in a kind of weird way, following a rehab program and progression can be nice because you get a lot more instant gratification than when you're just doing like your normal strength training, and you're striving for numbers. Where at least like day to day, you can almost feel better in a
Yeah.
rehab, especially when it's acute at the start. Like you can go from not being able to walk one day to pretty much able to walk. Like when I remember the day I got my knee out of my brace, um, and I was like, holy fuck, I can't walk. And by the evening, I was like strutting like Conor McGregor down the hallway,
Yeah.
So but that's just confidence in it. Like, the knee was able to walk. I just didn't have any confidence in it because I'd been locked in this brace even when sleeping for 3.5, 4 weeks. So I think that it can be nice in that kind of weird way. I'd still rather not be injured, but at least you can see that quick progression. And you kind of get that small bit of more. It's a bit more instant gratification. Um, when I was younger, I was just a rabbit in the headlights. It was all new, so it's a bit of novelty, kind of coming in and being looked after and spending so much time with the physios or the doctors or whoever, and like they kind of holding your hand through it, and like your first surgery is like, holy fuck, I'm going for surgery here. This is
Hmm.
mad, like. Oh, like, and then you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to recover. Like, what's going to happen when I go under anesthetic? You've all these. As you get a bit older, you're like, fuck, another injury. But you're like, right. And then like, there's times when like I think you go really hard at it. And then there's other times when like you're just in pure survival mode and you got to get in and you got to get the monotonous rehab done because you have to do it because you're a professional and you're doing your job. But it's hard, and so like not every day is easy. And I think the people that are leading the rehab, the more interactive they are with it, with the athletes, and keeping them involved in the process and the decision making, and keeping them on the know how, and like being as organized as they can for the players so that he knows what he's doing. I think that's massive in it as well, like because it keeps them engaged. And if you feel like you're being well looked after and progressing and you know what's coming, like I think it's so much easier for someone to see the road ahead, because sometimes it can feel like you're just fucking flogging a dead horse and doing the same shit day in, day out, and it's fucking boring. Like it is
Yeah.
boring, especially the acute stages. where you're just doing fucking dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, inversion, eversion of your ankle, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh my goodness me, if I have to do any more of this, like, but it's so important because it's the foundation to build off. Um, but I think like the support people around them like is so important to just keeping the players' head in as well and keeping them involved, like and actually in it, because it's so easy to wander. It's so
Yeah.
easy to wander, and you find like if you lose your quality of rehab for a day or two, it's not the end of the world. If you lose it for 2 weeks, like you're missing out and getting
Yeah.
back on the pitch a bit earlier. Um, so it's hard, but there's definitely, without a doubt, even in this last rehab I did, and like you said, I've had a good few of them now. Like there was days and even weeks where I was like, fucking stay in it, man. Just stay in it. Just
Yeah.
go in, get it done. Don't worry about doing extras. Just get the fucking minimum done. Go home, go to the beach, spend some time with friends, clear your head, and then you'll be fine. That motivation or whatever will come back, and you'll be like, give yourself a break, get away from it, like because it's hard, and especially like this season, like I didn't have any bye week at all. Like so I was in
Wow.
every
Yeah.
single week,
Right.
4 or 5 days, 4 or 5, 6 days a week from January through till mid July,
Yeah.
where everyone else got to go away for 2 weeks, where I was in for all of it because I did it the week before first bye week, and I was back fit again like the week after the second one. So it was just like kind of it's just the way it worked out, but that's part of the game, And I knew that by me not going away or maybe having 2 days off in a row instead of one or whatever it was, that I did manage to get, like I knew that was going to get me back sooner. And you gotta kind of go back to what's the North Star. The North Star is I want to play at the next World Cup. I want to play professionally. I want to help the team. So then you go back to that, and then when I get overcome with emotion, I go back to that and I find that North Star, and I'm like, okay, what moves me closer to that? Right, this is what I'm doing. And
Yeah.
then like that's the life you signed up for. Strap in. I've had plenty of bye weeks before when I haven't been injured. Just happened that I didn't get any, and also you're living in Miami, so you're kind of on holidays anyway.
Yeah.
So
This is where you would vacation anyway. Now you're finally
yeah, so
here.
it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So yeah, so I think that's kind of my thought process around it. I think the more organized it is, the better, because it's
Mhm.
easy to see what's ahead of you. It's
Yeah.
easy to know what you're doing. You don't feel like you're just doing random shit, because it can feel like that sometimes, especially when you start getting back to like some of the, like I said, the acute stuff, or like as you're building it up in the gym before you can actually get back on the pitch. Um, like some of that stuff can be like, why am I doing that? But I obviously, as an experienced guy, I know. But I think like the more the players included in it, knows the journey ahead, and then is getting the explanations of why you're doing it and what you need to be able to do before you can progress. I think that's massive.
Yeah. And I think outside of the obvious skill profession or the obvious skill difference between whether it be a university or academy player and a professional athlete is exactly what you just described. And from the physio side, that's probably one of the biggest differences and progressions that I've seen with players is that, you know, why a lot of physios I think really enjoy working with pro athletes is because they finally accepted that to be an athlete, you need to do these things. Like I don't have to sell you every single day on doing your rehab exercises. It's like you understand that this is part of the process. And being a professional is accepting that rehab, the monotonous rehab, and being consistent and doing this every day is your progression as a professional. And knowing that that's just part of the gig. It's part of doing it. And especially with a sport like rugby, it's not if, it's when you're going to have to do rehab, So it's like, I think a lot of athletes think about, oh, well, they haven't had that experience that many times. Whereas it's been really cool to work with rugby players in that most of the time they've been through this so many times that there's very little, we're not introducing a new concept here. You understand that, again, the best ability is you being available. So you need to be available, and to be available, you need to do all the extras, and you need to do rehab, prehab, recovery, and all of those things. And if you're not, you're probably not going to last in this sport. And it's neat to see that it's growing, but it's also that professionals have accepted that, and working with them allows, we can focus on the good stuff and not have to worry about convincing you that, you got to do rehab to get back on the field. So I think it's really cool that that's really a big part of rugby, and why I love working with rugby athletes and just being a part of rugby is those things are seemingly just a part of the sport. It's not separate. Where a lot of other sports, some athletes might make it almost to the end of their college career and not have that many injuries and not really have to do rehab. and then they transition into professional, and it's like, you get injured because the intensity's higher, the exposure's higher, the whatever it may be, and the chance of you getting injured. I mean, that's part of sports. So it's really neat to hear. What's something that you would like to dive into or explain about rugby that most people don't know about rugby, and less about the sport itself, but more about being a rugby player and what that experience is like, that is probably different from many other sports?
So I think one of the big things in professional rugby, and it's in professional sport as well, but maybe less so in the States because you're still in the same country. There's just so many cultures involved in rugby. Like, I mean, even this year with the Sharks, like we've guys from New Zealand, South Africa, Chile, Uruguay, Argentina, England, Wales, Ireland, Canada, obviously America, and I'm definitely missing a few more. The Netherlands, like, there's guys from. Sorry to anyone else that I missed, but there's people from everywhere, like, and trying to bring that many cultures. I think we had 11 different nationalities in the team this year. I think bringing that many cultures together is a clusterfuck at times. Like, not because people aren't willing to do it, just because it's just so different. So how I say one thing to someone might be my way of expressing it. That might be taken as offensive in a different culture, or
Yeah.
that word mightn't be used, or that word mightn't be understood, or even the mannerisms that we use. All that stuff can be really hard, like. So I think that's one thing that I think me in particular, I'm lucky to have experienced having played in Ireland, in England, in France, in Canada, in America, and then playing the international games, being all over the world. Like, I think that's something massive that I have been lucky to experience. But the other side of that is that it's quite taxing on relationships. It's quite taxing on even yourself. Like, you're up moving every 6 months, 12 months, 24 months.
Yeah.
36 if you've signed a longer term deal, like, and some guys do spend their entire career in one place. But like for me, I've moved around an awful lot. I've decided that, okay, right, I'm not at the absolute elite of the game, so I may as well see as much of the world for free as I can and go and do that. And that's a choice that I've made. But it's also taxing on the people around you. It's hard. Like, it's not easy to be a support network to someone that is living out of a suitcase or to come on that journey with them. So I think that's probably one side of some of the pro sport that people don't see, and especially when you're not making the same money as an NFL player or soccer player, you're not bringing home hundreds of thousands a week. Um, so while you might be experience rich and like culture rich, that kind of thing, you're not always financially rich. But you have a lot of life experience, and like I said, I played rugby with people from probably the bones of 20 different countries, which is so cool. So like learning all that, I could speak a second language, not Spanish, French. Like I say, I eat an apple in Spanish, which is Duolingo helped me with. But so yeah, I think that's probably a side of the game that people don't see, and they just think, oh, it's pro sport, it's easy. But it's not easy. Every time you relocate, open a new bank account, getting insurance, going to hospitals, doing all these medicals, getting surgery in a foreign country where you barely speak the language, doing rehab and all that stuff in a different country in a different language. That's hard. That's challenging, and that is taxing mentally. Like, you go to bed in the evening, you're like, fuck, my head is exhausted.
Yeah.
Just done a full day in French. When I started learning the language a year ago, and you're conversing in French, even going to the bank trying to transfer money, like all these little things become much bigger tasks. Like going doing your shopping, oh, I can't find your groceries, like I can't find something. Oh man, I gotta go now. I gotta build up the courage to go and ask someone, and they're not going to understand my
Yeah.
accent. They're
Yeah.
definitely not going to understand my accent. So you just show them a picture and you say, "Got
There
this."
you go.
Kind of like you figure out these ways, but it is definitely a side of the game that's not as straightforward and glamorous as people think. And then people are going to say, "Oh, you just said you get to live all over the world. Like, that's the best thing ever." It's good. There's so many perks to it, but there's definitely challenges that come with it as well. Like even relocating to the States, having to get a visa, having to set up a bank account without an American number. Like, I can't get an American number until I have an American bank account. It's like, why does the system set me up for this to be so difficult?
Yes.
And getting a visa to the States is maybe the least straightforward thing that I've ever had to do in my life. The amount of paperwork and everything is chronic, but like you just kind of get it done, and you just take things one task at a time. And like I said, there's so many positives to it all, but there's definitely been challenges, and it's not always been easy.
Who has been a mentor for you, or who has helped you through this whole process, or has there been many people that have really guided you? Like, do you have any younger coaches that you still talk to, or who is your support system right now, and who has mentored you to get to where you are?
So dad would have worked in sport his whole life. He would have coached with the IRFU, the Irish Rugby Football Union, and he still works in with Coaching Ireland, who are one of they basically help all the governing bodies kind of
Okay.
facilitate their training programs for their coaches and kind of make sure that everything is boxed off neatly and kind of designed out well so that they keep the inclusion of everyone and all that kind of stuff. So dad does a lot of work in that. So I feel like when it comes to bouncing sports stuff off dad, like he's absolutely fantastic for it. Obviously, my mom is there then for massively for the emotional support of it all when
Hmm.
I'm up and down and all that kind of stuff. And then friends and stuff. And there's lots of coaches that I would have played with throughout the years, and even other players and stuff. Some older guys, some guys now that I would be taking that older role for them. And you kind of just bounce off each other in that kind of. Sometimes you just need to chat. Sometimes you just need to moan, and sometimes you just need someone to tell you that it's going to be all right. Like just stay in it, man. Like don't worry, it's going to come good, and that kind of stuff. So I've honestly, my network is so vast, and I still am in touch with guys from my first club when I would have played with them back in my first pro club back in 2013, and I'm just going back to my club that I would have played with before that. Now, one of my boyhood, one of my first senior clubs in Ireland. So I'm going back in. I'm actually back in with them this evening. So like, and I still have so many people from there that are your biggest fans that are shouting you on, that are constantly hoping that you do well and wishing you luck, and still get text messages before games from people that you might have seen in 15 years. So the network is there. The rugby community is absolutely sensational. Like it's so close knit. It's so everyone's fantastic. Um, but yeah, I have a big network around me. And like I said, coaches I would have played with before, I'd still be able to pick up the phone and ring them, and like lots of good relationships that way. But I suppose your family is always going to be the cornerstone and that kind of centerpiece for me anyway, where they've always really helped me that way.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that's why you've created the Rugby Mentor program in the first place, right? Is because I'm assuming that you're attributing a lot of your success to having great mentorship, and that's been, the cornerstone to you getting to where you are, is having that backing. Especially, it's got to be really cool to have your parents be heavily involved in your experience, and even be well versed and educated and understanding your experience, because I feel like that can be the tough part, is if your parents either didn't play the sport, don't really know the sport that well, they can support you, but only to a certain level, right? That they don't understand what you're actually going through as an athlete, or whether it be going through injuries or whatever it may be. Do you
Yeah, and I
feel
think
like?
having someone that's oh sorry, just someone
No,
that's
go
been
ahead.
impartial from it, so like the emotion that comes with it, it's fucking so hard to see between the lines sometimes,
Yeah.
where the guy, especially the players I'm helping, like the athletes, if they're emotional about something, I'm not emotional about that. So I can see it clearly. And that's I think where one of the guys was struggling with some communication style stuff a couple of months back, and he found like guys were snapping back at him, and I was like, well, how are you phrasing things? Like, are you actually approaching them? He's like, oh, I'm shouting at them. I'm like, well, man, like if I shout at you, what are you going to do back to me? You're going to say, fuck off. I don't want to hear that at all. Like I'm not definitely not listening to him. He's coming way too out of me. So it's like even small things like that they can bounce off someone, and you can like if you've had an altercation or some kind of thing with someone, as soon as it comes up, you start talking. Oh no, I'm not bothered about it. Because by the end of it, you're pacing, you're flying around the place, you're it gets under your skin. It's normal. You're a human.
Yeah.
But having someone that's impartial to that is huge. And I have mentors as well, like outside of this, like that help me with business and life stuff, um, and making decisions that way. And when I'm emotional, I bounce things off them, and they can see it with that impartial view. Um, and I think, like I said, sometimes you just need an outlet to just go and talk. But like some of the things we help the guys who are like communication stuff, obviously the actual rugby side of it, but even stuff like composing emails to coaches, how to speak to them, how to actually talk to them so that you can get what you want out of the relationship, and not just have this authoritative figure that you're scared of. So I think like in terms of the mentorship, like that's where it's come from. Like, 'cause I've had to speak to how many coaches in my career that I didn't want to go and talk to, or that I felt like I didn't get on well, or they didn't like me, and this kind of stuff. And I think like the sooner you approach that stuff, the less it builds up and the less it eats away at you. And having someone that's walked the walk, and then can talk the talk to you, so you can go and walk the walk yourself.
That's amazing, man. And you're taking your experience and giving back to the sport. And again, I think that is all sports need that, and it's going to maintain the culture. And another another really interesting part about rugby that I did not know, and maybe you can experience it by watching on television, but probably not. It's very different from American contact sports. Is where does the like the gentleman's culture come from? Where in rugby has that, like, where was that established? It's kind of like the unwritten rule, I guess. I don't know. It's I had no idea because in American football, it is mostly not like that at all, right? And obviously, they're two very different
It's
sports,
funny
but
because
they're
you see
still,
some.
we're smacking hands, and it's changed a little bit. Like you'll see now in the NFL, like the teams come together at the middle, and they do a little bit of jersey swap or whatever it may be. But there's such a gentleman's thing about rugby, and it makes it, to me, such an enjoyable part of the sport that you can go smash each other, want to kill each other, and then at the end of it, enjoy some beers together and like it never happened, and give each other their flowers and give each other respect. I think that is so important in sports and in life, to just teach life lessons to younger generations, across all of it. But where did that come from? Is that just like
I
in
don't
certain
actually know.
countries?
I don't know where it started. I know back when it was amateur, like guys used to play and then drink beers together. But even us as young guys, when we played against a team from like under 12 or 13 up, we would play against them no matter what the score, no matter how many fights. The home team would clap off the away team. The away team would then clap, like make a tunnel, walk the home team off, and then the home team would clap the away team off again.
Okay.
Every game, rain, hail, shine, fist fights, broken noses, ACLs, no matter what the fuck happened, no matter how many fights, red cards, that's what happened. And then you go in and you'd have a feed in the clubhouse, and some guys would mingle more than others, but both teams would eat together in the same room. And that was the whole way up. And then as you get older, obviously, you can drink.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you just started having a beer or two with them in the clubhouse after, and then they get on the bus, go home, and you'd make your way home with someone that wasn't drinking. And that was kind of, that's just, I don't know, but it's always the way. Like I've played against guys where I punched them, they punched me in the face, and then afterwards we drink a beer and laugh about it because it's funny that we lost our tempers. It's like,
Yeah.
you lost your head, man.
Yeah.
Ah, you did too.
And it
All right,
should
fair
be
enough.
like
Cheers. And
that.
then and then it's weird because then I'll always remember that guy, and you have that kind of weird bond with him where you kind of hate him, but you also respect him, and you kind
Absolutely.
of like him now because he also had a beer with you after punching you. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like, you know, it's a weird kind of bond. He's one of the few people that have actually managed to punch me. Um, so yeah, I don't know, but
Canada was
it's
like
like that
that.
across
France was like that. Everywhere is kind of,
everywhere, man.
yeah.
Everywhere. Maybe not always the clap off thing, but like
Right.
always the mingle after. Always. If a team shoots off and doesn't come in, you'd be like, oh, fucking, that's
Yeah.
weird, like.
Right.
And then you're like, oh, they must have to catch a flight or a train or something like that. Would be the only thing. And if you knew that was happening, then they'd be like, oh, here's sandwiches for the bus. Like, you take that and off you go. So I think there's a lot of pride in hosting people as well, like, you know, and like people care about what it looks like, how the clubhouse is, how the fans are. And fans are fucking hostile in the game. Don't get me wrong. Like sometimes, you know,
Hmm.
but then afterwards, they clap them off. Well done. Oh, fair play, lads. You deserve to beat us at home today. You know, like that kind of thing. Um, but you see it even in games, like lads absolutely crunching each other. Like it could be pucking the heads off each other or anything, and then the referee will call them together. They nearly always shake hands straight away. They want to get on with it. So yeah, I don't know, but it is definitely one of the strong points. And you see some crossover athletes sometimes from football, and they're like roaring in the face or slapping guys in the head in the ground, and rugby people are just like, "Are you fucking alright, lad? Like what is going on here?" Oh man, I remember the first time I seen it, I was like, "Who is that guy? And why does he think that he is fucking
Right.
God's gold? Like
Yeah.
who? Why does he think that? Why? What gives him the right to do that? Like that's so strange." But I think guys like that, when they come into rugby, tend to get found out fairly quickly, and they'll get brought down a peg. If not by getting absolutely clattered by someone, by their own teammates, to be like, "I rein your neck in there. Like this is a team sport. You know, you're not the. It's not the Shane show or whatever. Like you know, back in line kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like we're all together, and you represent all of us. And I think as well, when you go out on the pitch, like you represent everything that's worked for you, everyone that's worked for you, and everyone you've worked with is kind of the perception of it. You know, it's not a this is me. I got here on my own. Did I fuck? Like I've had so much love and support, unconditional around me, and people have helped me and put their neck out on the line for me and everything just to get to where I am. So I kind of want to carry myself at carry myself well so that I represent them all well as well, and
Yeah.
you're kind of making everyone else proud. So
Yeah, there's a lot of pride, just like generally in the sport across the board. It's I think it's what again makes it really special. And I don't know if that's viewable from TV, from just watching
well,
the sport.
even stuff like the changing rooms after, like how many times have you had to clean up or carry all the medical equipment out on your own? Like probably never. So
Exactly.
like
Never.
even small things like that, it's just ingrained. Like if
Yes.
someone
Yes.
leaves and they don't pick up their tape that they took off, you'd be calling them out straight away. And
Yeah.
it's kind of like even the young guys would be able to call out the old guys. The old guys would never do it, but
Yeah.
do you know
Well,
what I
even
mean?
the
Like
old
it kind
guys
of
do. That's the thing. Is like even a lot of the vets was like, wow. They're offering to grab the bag or grab whatever, and it's always offer, hey, you good? Everything's good. And yeah, I mean, and just be willing to support you. Like, hey, did somebody say something to you or whatever? Right? It's like there's just
yeah.
such a family
Team. It's just a
prideful.
big team.
Yeah,
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 big team. And the work that you medical staff do for us is unrivaled. Like in terms of the extra treatments, everything, days off, all that stuff. Like is like the players appreciate it a lot
yeah,
because without you, we wouldn't be able to have our greatest ability, which, as you've said multiple times, is availability. So
yeah. Exactly. What about your thoughts after rugby, or have you had throughout your experience? I had experienced this early on. I did not play professionally, but even through college, like I would get an injury or something would happen. Be like, oh man, this is about to be taken away from me. What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? Where am I going to put my time? How am I going to function? I never even thought about this. And then, a certain situation happens and you start thinking about those things. Have you thought a lot about that? Because obviously you're not getting any younger, and you've had an
Benjamin Button, man, what are you
extensive
on about?
you've had an extensive career, and your body it does eventually, it's going to get to a point where rugby may not be an option for you. Have you thought about those things, or what that may look like for you?
Yeah, so like I think when I was younger, like every time I got injured, it's like I'll be back in this much time. No doubt in my mind at all. And sure enough, I did come back every time. But even with my knee, like this year, when it was like, all right, I've now hurt my ankle on that side. I've had surgery on my ankle and my adductor on that side, and now I've ruptured the ligament in my knee. I was like, fucking hell, has anyone got a new left leg? But like of course it goes through your mind, but I think I've been putting the foundations down for 2 or 3 years now in terms of starting to get my own online mentorship up and running, and I've done a little bit of like personal training, S&C stuff as well, and then kind of brought it into the one-stop shop for people that want to really kick on with the rugby. So I've started putting that in place. Also started doing some coaching, rugby coaching. So while obviously that ties in nicely to the rugby mentor, which I'm doing, like it's also definitely an avenue that I'm interested in. I think like with my vast experience of all these different cultures, of all these different styles, but also the kind of rugby knowledge that I have from a long career, and like I'm a bit of a rugby nerd. Like I love obsessing over the small details of it, like way more than other people. Like I want to know why we're doing what we're doing all the time. Why am I doing that? I need to understand why I'm doing it so that I can do it to the best of my ability. And I like bringing that and passing that on and helping people that way. So something along the lines of I'd love to be a professional coach at some stage, and then also keep that the rugby mentor going so that I can hopefully grow that up and bring in other people to the team, and hopefully make it as affordable as possible for as many people as possible. And I'd love to have like multiple rugby coaches in, a medical team, S&C team, like mindset and psychology team. I'd love for it to get to that stage. Obviously that's down the line. But that's what I'd love to grow that into, like a kind of like a virtual, like semi-virtual kind of academy, which I
Yeah,
missed out on. I want to
that's
bring that to
amazing.
as many people as possible. I want to make it available to everyone. Um, because I don't think one person's opinion when you're 18 on whether you get an academy spot or not should dictate whether you kick on, and you shouldn't be able to clip someone's wings and stop them from flying at such a young age. There's
Yeah,
loads of guys that hit their potential when they're in their mid 20s, and why can't you transition that? You know, so that's kind of what I want to do, and I think it's pretty much the coaching, mentoring kind of path is what I'm looking to go down now. So yeah, I'm going to get some more coaching experience over the next couple of months here in Ireland, one of the best clubs in the country, which is good. And then come back, obviously, into MLR next year and try and do a bit of coaching in and around the in and around my own playing season. But playing rugby is very much so the main priority at the moment.
Absolutely. No question.
I am not that old, just to clarify.
Once you hit that big 3-0, things start to get a little interesting.
I don't even remember hitting that anymore.
Last one for you. The ideal athlete. What are the attributes of an ideal athlete to you?
X Factor, straight away. I love that just because I love it. Class highlight reels, everything. But under the X Factor, there has to be consistency, professionalism. I was going to say loyalty, but loyalty to yourself and the team you're currently at. I don't think loyalty to a franchise.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's bollocks when people bring that up, but especially when franchises are not loyal to anyone.
Yep.
So in any sport, so fuck that idea. But loyalty to yourself and your team when you're there. So yeah, loyalty, professionalism. I think like your day-to-day attitude is so important. Like, you know, and just remembering that rugby's bigger than you. Everything about it is bigger than you. You're not bigger than the sport. You're not bigger than your team. You're not bigger than the people around you, even if you're the best player in the team. So having that kind of humility and kind of that level of being humble, and more importantly than anything, just being fucking sound. Don't be an arsehole. Just be a good guy or a good girl or whatever. And if you do that, you will go places. From me being sound throughout my career, I still have people that I worked with 10, 15 years ago that are willing to put their neck on the line for me now to get me into some spots for coaching, to get me professional gigs. Character reference is always good. It's always one of the first things that people will ask about. So unless you are literally the Lionel Messi of rugby and you're an arsehole, you're not going to make it. Because people don't want that in their environment. Like, you know, there's that saying like, oh, it's great having a pool, but if you've got one shit in your pool, you've still got a pool full of shit. You know, so you don't want to disrupt it by having one arrogant arsehole in there. You know, so clubs will avoid that like the plague. So I think the biggest thing that advice I can give to people is just be fucking sound and just be yourself. I think more so in sport now than ever before, people want you to be yourself. It's not necessarily like this military mold anymore. There is an element to it, but like if you're quirky and you're a bit of an oddball, people love that. Because if you're just being authentic, people feed into your energy and people will love that and clubs will love that. You'll bring good atmosphere around and you're not just going into your shell and being so regimented all the time. Like, of course, you have to follow standards and behaviors. There's expectations day to day. But if you can be yourself and be a good person, I think like the launch pad that you're giving yourself is you're going to set yourself up. Even if there's guys that are slightly better than you, but they're not good people or they're not as good a person as you, like often they'll take you.
Agreed. And I don't think a lot of athletes think about that when they're working with their coaches, they're working with their teammates. You're building your network for life. And I don't think a lot of athletes think about that when they're going through their process. And exactly like you just said, a lot of those people that you worked with 15 years ago are now supporting you 15 years later in chasing your dream and doing what you want to because you were professional, because you were respectful. And you took the time to understand that. And now it's paying dividends. And I think the earlier on you do that, I mean, I have the same experience. I would not be anywhere where I am today if I did not be respectful early on, because those people have gotten me to where I am today. And there's so much to be said for that. And I love that and it's just so funny to me because it's the culture of rugby. It's what it is. And that's why I wanted to ask you this question, because I had assumed that you were going to answer in the way you did, which is the focus on professionalism. And, you know, it's so important because to be a professional, you have to have professionalism. And I don't think a lot of people think that of professional athletes. It's like, well, they're just an athlete. It's like, no, they have professional attributes as an athlete. And I don't think a lot of professional athletes make it very far in athletics unless you're a Lionel Messi, for example, or you're at the top of the top of the top without being respectful, without having a positive attitude. People want to have to be around you. And especially in a team sport, you want to work for each other. And you have to have that respect for each other because you're not going to get it done on your own. It takes your team. And it takes that camaraderie, it takes that respect and professionalism. So I appreciate that.
And just to follow on from that as well, Kyle, that these are sometimes things that people don't notice, right?
Yes.
But if you're not doing them, holy God, you stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
You know, you're straight away, you're the bad egg, like, you know. So it's not something that's necessarily like, oh, thank you for getting all your video analysis done and being professional and having your notes ready for the meeting and contributing. You don't necessarily get that. But if you're not doing anything, you're sitting down, bad body language down the back, they're like, that lad's an asshole and he needs
Yeah.
to go. You know, like he's bringing not the right culture in here. And I think like realistically, all professional sport is just human optimization, right? And getting the how can you make this person play to reach their absolute max potential as a person more so than anything. Because if you're not happy and you're going in, like, are you going to play well? Like maybe sometimes, but you're
Yeah.
not going to have consistent output. And I think that's what rugby is. And you're not just trying to get max human output; you're trying to get max 40 or 50 people output in the same direction at the same time, which comes back to culture and environment so much more. People are happy, people are enjoying it, if people feel like they're contributing and that they have a say in stuff, like all the best teams in the world have good culture,
Yeah.
you know, and they have
Absolutely.
that culture where standards are enforced from within as opposed to from a dictator figure. Um, so like just to reaffirm what you said there, like, and what I said is that these professional attributes and these good person attributes are some of the most important, because if you don't have them, you will stick out. If you have them, you're not necessarily going to get a pat in the back either, but you'll be absolutely found out. You'll be found out if you don't have them. So I think they're super important.
Yeah, and it's the time to develop those things. And if you use sports and your experiences within team sports to develop those things, your transition from being an athlete into life, I feel like, will be so much of a better experience. You can tell if you're around a former professional athlete and they haven't done that transition during their athletic career, and they try to bring that arrogance and that ego approach to life. And it's like, oh, you still think we care about you scoring touchdowns 5 years ago. It's like, we don't. You still have to be a good person, and like that
Yeah,
combination is so important. And I think detaching from that is a dangerous thing. And I think that that's the big value in society for coaches, is that you're helping create and shape people for, to represent you, to represent themselves. But that's really the deep value in coaches, is how do you pull that out in people, and how do you help develop men, women in this process so that they can take these attributes for life. Because that's where the real value comes from, in my opinion. Because like you said, a lot of times you're not making that much money. You're not making enough money where you can retire at the age of 25 or 30. It's the value that you're getting is not just money. And like you said, you get to travel and meet different people, but it's really in developing the professionalism and just being a good human being, and learning how to be authentic, and developing your confidence and learning how to work with the team. And that will forever drive you through life, and help you succeed throughout life.